Hello, Virgo. Uh, Let me say something to you right at the beginning, before anything else, because I want it to be the foundation of everything that follows. They read you wrong. Not a small misreading, not the ordinary error of someone who did not have full information. A fundamental misreading of who you are, of what you carry, of the specific quality of your presence, and of what happens to people in situations and dynamics that underestimate you. Welcome, and let this message do what it is designed to do, which is to name something that has been true about you for a very long time, and that others are only now beginning to understand. There is a specific kind of person who is dangerous to underestimate. Not dangerous in the obvious way, not dangerous in the way that announces itself and invites the appropriate caution from anyone who is paying attention. Dangerous in the quiet way, the way of still water that gives no indication of the depth beneath its surface until someone steps in assuming shallowness and discovers otherwise in the most direct possible way. You are that kind of person. And the people who got comfortable in the assumption of your manageability are discovering this now in the form of a realization that arrives not gradually, but all at once when something happens or is revealed or simply becomes undeniable that the person they thought they understood was not who they thought they were at all. Whew. I want to speak about what spiritually lethal actually means, because I want to use that phrase with full precision rather than letting it be impressive language without specific content. Spiritually lethal does not mean harmful, does not mean dangerous to others in the way of causing damage, does not mean anything that operates from a place of aggression or intention to wound. Spiritually lethal means that your energy, in its full and unmanaged form, is more than most people and most situations and most dynamics built on false premises can survive intact. It means that when you are fully yourself, without the accommodation, without the softening, without the deliberate reduction of your own size to fit into the space that others have decided is the appropriate size for you, something happens to the things around you that were not built to hold that much. They reorganize, or they fall away, or the people in them suddenly see something they could not see before when you were smaller than you are. That capacity to reorganize the energy around you simply by being fully yourself is what I mean by spiritually lethal. I want to describe what the underestimation looked like, because I think naming it specifically will help you recognize what I am describing and why it is now in the process of being corrected in the most undeniable way. The underestimation came from your accommodating nature, or your patience, or your particular way of moving through the world, without making a lot of noise about what you carry, without announcing your gifts, or your power, or the full extent of what you are capable of. When you are operating from your deepest and most authentic level, people saw the accommodation and concluded that accommodating was all you were. They saw the patience and confused it with passivity. They saw the quiet and interpreted it as limitation rather than as the particular stillness of someone who moves only when movement is warranted and who saves the full force of their presence for the moments that deserve it. They got comfortable with the accommodating version of you and forgot to account for what happens when the accommodation ends. Now I want to describe the hit, because that is what the title promises, and it is what is happening, or what has already happened, in the space between you and the people who underestimated you. The hit is not something you did to them. I want to be clear about that. You did not retaliate. You did not plan or strategize. You did not orchestrate a moment of revelation designed to show them what they missed when they were reading you as smaller than you are. The hit is simply what happens when someone who has been underestimated stops performing the underestimated version of themselves and simply is fully, without editing, without reduction, without the accommodation that kept the full version invisible to people who were not looking closely enough or who needed you to be manageable and mistook your willingness to accommodate them for the full extent of who you are. When the full version showed up, unedited, they were not prepared for it because their preparation was based on the smaller version, and the smaller version was never the truth. Huh. I want to tell you what the hit looks like for them from the inside, because I think understanding their experience will help you understand why what is happening is not something to feel guilty about, or to manage on their behalf, or to soften by returning to the accommodating version. That felt more comfortable for everyone, including them. The hit looks like recalibration, the specific discomfort of someone who built their understanding of a situation on data that has just been proven incomplete, who has to now revise everything they thought they knew about who you are and what you are capable of and what the dynamic between you actually is and has always been. Underneath the version they were comfortable with, it looks like the particular humility of someone who got something wrong in a way that is now undeniable, and who has to decide whether to acknowledge the error or to find some other frame that preserves the original underestimation despite the evidence against it. Some of them will choose acknowledgement and adjust, and the dynamic between you will shift accordingly into something more honest and more proportionate to who you actually are. And some of them will resist and find ways to explain what they encountered that preserve the comfortable version of you that they had already built their understanding around. Both of those responses are theirs to manage, not yours. I want to speak now about what spiritually lethal specifically refers to in your particular case, because I think you need to understand what you carry in the most concrete terms possible rather than in the abstract language. That can sound powerful without giving you anything to actually hold. You carry a particular quality of seeing that cuts through performance and presented versions and the managed surfaces that most people offer to the world instead of what is actually underneath. Your perception operates at a level that reaches what people are actually about rather than what they want you to think they are about. And that perception, when it is directed at something, has a quality of exposure to it that people who have been operating with managed presentations find distinctly uncomfortable because they cannot perform their way out of it. The way they can with most people, you carry a quality of energy that disrupts stagnation, that makes it difficult for things that are not true or not aligned or not genuinely what they present themselves as being. To remain comfortable in your proximity, your presence has a clarifying effect on the energy around you that is not always comfortable for the things being clarified, but that is always honest and always ultimately useful. Even when the short-term experience of that clarification is disruptive and you carry an integrity, a groundedness in what is real and true and aligned, that makes the inauthentic in the people and situations around you visible in a way it was not visible before you arrived, because contrast does that. When something genuinely real is placed next to something that is performing realness, the performance becomes obvious. In a way, it was not obvious before the real thing showed up. For comparison, that is what is spiritually lethal about you. The seeing, the clarifying, the integrity that makes inauthenticity visible simply by existing in the same space with it. I want to address something now that I think might be sitting in you. As you receive this message, a particular discomfort with being described this way, with the full force of what you carry, named directly, without the softening that you perhaps supply when you describe yourself to others or to yourself. You have been taught in various ways over various seasons of your life that the full version of yourself is too much, that the spiritually lethal quality, the seeing, the clarifying, the presence that disrupts what is not true, makes people uncomfortable and therefore needs to be managed, reduced, offered in smaller doses than the full version would require. And you learn to do that. The managing, the reducing, the accommodation that made you easier to be around. For people who found the full version more than they could comfortably hold, that accommodated version is what got underestimated because it presented itself as the whole when it was only a portion. And the people who received that portion made the natural error of concluding that the portion was the whole. The correction of that error is not your fault, and it is not your responsibility to soften. I want to give you something now to carry forward from this message, something practical about how to move in the aftermath of having been underestimated and in the revelation of what was always true about who you actually are. Stop performing the smaller version, not gradually, not in careful doses, not with constant management of how much of yourself you allow into any given interaction based on how much the other person seems able to receive. Be the full version consistently in the spaces that deserve it, with the people who have demonstrated that they can be in the presence of someone real without needing that realness to be scaled back for their comfort, and let the spaces and people that cannot accommodate the full version self-select out as they will when the managed version is no longer being offered as the primary presentation. The ones that remain will be the ones worth having, because they will be the ones who chose the real version of you, knowing what it was and preferring it to the comfortable managed alternative. They got comfortable underestimating you because you made it comfortable for them by offering less than the full version for longer than was necessary, or honest, or ultimately serving of either of you. And then they got hit by what was always there underneath the accommodation that had been keeping the full version from being visible to people who were not looking carefully enough to see it. The hit is complete, or it is coming, depending on where you are in this. And the people who underestimated you are in the process of recalibrating their understanding of who they are dealing with. What comes after the recalibration is up to them, and what you allow from the full version of yourself rather than from the managed one is up to you. You are spiritually lethal in the specific and undeniable way that I have just described, not because you chose to be, but because it is simply what you are when you are fully yourself, without reduction, without accommodation, without the careful sizing down of what you bring to the world so that others are more comfortable. In your presence, the discomfort of the people who underestimated you is not yours to solve. The full version of you is not a problem to be managed. It is exactly what it is, which is extraordinary.